Woolie, get out the chocolate chips. Do you want to see how we save a lot of money by doing a little weekend prep?
But this would be like a good gateway into healthier eating as well.
2 thumbs up, and approved. The internet loves a meal prep video, so this is our version. We just do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. When things baking, or soaking, or instant potting. We're not really a big meal prep family in that we like cut a bunch of vegetables up and make a bunch of meals for the week. That's not the way we do it. What we do is more set ourselves up with a bunch of staples and snacks and other things that we can enjoy throughout the week that can also save us from buying a lot of processed junk and gives us snacks and things that we need. Today, my wife Woolie and I are gonna walk you through a bunch of our family staple recipes, from things like granola, granola bars, jam, broth, cookies, and more.
Ooh.
And stick around to the end because I'm gonna show you how I make a soup entirely by thinking and how you can do this thing. Gotta go, we're making soup! This video is gonna be a slightly different style than my usual videos where I just make one recipe at a time and you see all the instructions all together. It's gonna be a bit jumbled because as you're prepping one thing and one thing's baking and you're mixing this over here, we're a little all over the place. So, stick with us. You might have to watch the whole thing through to see an entire recipe. That's just kind of how it is on a meal prep weekend. Snack prep weekend, whatever we're calling what we do here. But before we jump into that, I'd love to say hello to some of the people who've said hello to us in the comments down below. Diana from Phoenix, Arizona, Isaac from Hawaii, Eric from Greenville, Mississippi, Jill from the Balearic Islands in Spain, Holly from Eugene, Oregon, Sue from Ottawa, Ontario, Kim from Selkirk in the United Kingdom, Sue from Nashville, Tennessee, Marlene from St. Thomas, Ontario, and Julie from California. If you'd like a shout out here on the channel, all you have to do is say hello to us in the comments down below. Let us know who you are, where you're watching from, and what do you do to prep for the week ahead. Or anything else you want to say. We're pretty flexible with what you say to us in the comments down below. If you want to bump up on that shout out list, you can join us over at what we like to call PB with J 2.0 at our Mighty Network. There you get that perk along with a whole bunch of others for the price of a crappy cup of coffee a month.
You don't have to drink that. Thank you.
Let us know in the comments down below which of these staples you can see yourself making, and if there's anything you'd like to see us make in a future video like this, assuming you would like a part 2 to this at some point. Now to the chaos in our kitchen.
Oh, how do I look? Any of my teeth?
Comment down below if there's something in Willie's teeth.
Don't you dare. Okay, so one great thing that you can make at home that's gonna save you a lot of cash is hummus. And it's so easy to make. So, for one batch of hummus, you need about 3/4 of a cup of chickpeas.
So just back up for a second. So people are going, well, why can't I just use chickpeas from a can?
Oh, you can, but you have to cook them a little longer. So you want your chickpeas for hummus to be overcooked. So they should be mushy because then you get a really smooth hummus blend in the end. You put them in, cover them with water, covering. And then I'm gonna add a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda to that water. So you can do the same thing with your canned chickpeas. In the Instant Pot, I'll cook this for about 45 minutes. So I think I haven't tried it, but I'd say like 15.
Normally we'd save the chickpea juice and use it as Aquafaba as a replacement for oil or eggs or other things. But we normally don't save the stuff that Willie uses for hummus because I don't know what the baking soda will do. I'm gonna do some research and then hopefully by the end of this video, I'll let you know if you can use it or not. Later on this week, I'm gonna make some kind of like a hoagie sandwich for those of us that can eat gluten. Sorry, Willie. There's this recipe I got from this website, the Rose Homestead, on a sourdough recipe that I like to use. I've actually modified it. Instead of olive oil, I'm gonna use my Aquafaba, which is chickpea juice. I kind of already talked about that a little bit. And instead of the honey, I'm gonna use maple syrup. Now, I know what you're asking, what happens if you don't have a sourdough starter like I do, this one. I fed this last night, and basically the rule for sourdough starter is just feed it for the amount you need. Like I need 3/4 of a cup, and then I wanna leave some for my next batch of whatever I make. So there's at least a cup in there, and I only need a little bit of it. But if you don't have sourdough, can you make this without it just using like quick rising yeast? Yes. It's a bit complicated though. You have to do some math. So say you need 200 grams of sourdough starter. You need 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water. to add to your recipe, plus like 2 teaspoons of quick rising yeast, like the little stuff you get in a jar or a packet.
Isn't it 2 1/4 teaspoons?
2 1/4, yeah. For like a standard recipe, generally speaking. So that's just really it. It's just the math. Like however many grams of sourdough starter, you just replace that with flour and water in equal weights. So for these buns, we're gonna start by just putting everything into a stand mixer and letting it knead for 15 minutes. We're using this Hoswart stand mixer, and there's a discount code in the description down below. You're probably gonna see a bunch of discount codes in this video because we use a lot of products that our sponsors have sent us. Thanks, sponsors. So as you will see on the screen, I actually just did the conversion for you as best I could. Even though this recipe is in cups and whatnot, I did a conversion on the screen for grams and whatnot if you want to weigh it. Typically in bread baking, you weigh ingredients because it just makes it more precise. Hey Annie, this is our resident bread expert in the house. She tests every single piece of bread that comes in this house, whether we make it or not, for quality assurance. Also, tangerines. So while our bread is kneading in the background, we're going to head down into the basement to our freezer. We actually just have one big freezer and one big fridge upstairs. So our fridge upstairs doesn't have a freezer section to it because we make a lot of stuff. We get frozen fruit and frozen vegetables for the times we can't get fresh. And it just allows us to freeze stuff that we make and not have to waste as many things. So one of the staples we're gonna make today is our own vegetable stock and our own jam. So the vegetable stock is literally just, as we cut our vegetables, all the ends and the trimmings and those little pieces of onions you can't eat or want, or any other vegetable, goes in this bag, goes in the freezer. And then I'm just gonna take like 2 or 3 handfuls of this, put it into our stock pot, fill it full of water. You can leave it as simple as that if you want, but if you want to throw in some bay leaves, if you want to throw in any other spices, you know, if you have any herbs that are going kind of sad in the fridge, this is a perfect way to use them up. We have some parsley, I think I'm going to use that. Flavor it however you want. What I especially love about making my own stock is that it's something that is 100% free when you make your own versus buying it for $2, $3 a package at the store. And you can control the sodium level if you don't want any salt in, like we don't. I'm just gonna throw in like a little bit of this Mrs. Dash that we have in the cupboard. It's like a very generous amount. It's nice to have like a lime, or not a lime, but a lemon. And then I'm gonna take these mixed berries. Whoops! We'll take these mixed berries upstairs. And we're gonna put 4 cups of these into our other pot and get them cooking down to make some jam. This is not typical of our cooking videos. We're gonna be jumping around a lot today from various recipes as we do different parts of them, because that's what a day in our kitchen looks like when we're just prepping for the week. Is we just do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and while one thing is doing one thing, one thing's baking or soaking or instant potting, we work on to something else. So after 15 minutes, that bread just it still seemed tacky. So I added a little more flour in, like 1/3 of a cup, maybe 1/2 of a cup, just because for me the dough should be solid and whatnot. It didn't pass the window test. The window test, which will show you once it is ready, is if you take a piece of the dough, you rip it off and you spread it out. It should spread and you should be able to see light through it. And the jam is starting to break down here on the stove. And I've used the mixed berries here. You can use any fruit. Any fruit in the world will work. Maybe not apples, because they release pectin differently. Maybe not bananas. Not any fruit. I don't know. Most fruits. I mean, experiment. Why not? Experiment. Maybe you can make a banana jam. I don't know. I'm not gonna be the one to tell you can't do that. Let me know in the comments down below what kind of jams you've made. Mash it down, and then all we're gonna add to that is some chia seeds. It'll thicken on the pot. The juices will kind of release themselves, and the chia will help soak it up. So we're gonna let that simmer for like another 10 minutes or so now that the chia seeds are in. And then once it's done, I'm gonna mix in my extracts. So I'm gonna put in a little vanilla extract, a little almond extract. I'm gonna let it sit and come to room temperature. Woolie, you had a tip for the chia jam?
You could blend the chia seeds before you mix them in, and then it'll be more of a powder, and so it won't be so seedy. So if you don't really like chia jam because of the seediness, that's a workaround.
Then I'll pour it into glass jars. One will go in the fridge. We can use it right away. And the other one will go in the freezer, and we just have a bonus for when we run out. The reason I do that is because this lasts at least like a week or two in the fridge for sure, but we don't go through jam that fast, and I just don't want any of it to go to waste. If you're a jam-loving family, you might eat it all in 1 week. Let's see how our dough is doing now. If it passes this test. Okay, I'm gonna rip off a little chunk. Okay, see this? See it's ripping apart. I can spread it. Generally speaking, you should be able to pull it pretty thin. So I'm going to cover this up with just a plate and put it in the warmest room in our house, which is our bathroom. I don't think people are gonna be affected.
It's kind of gross.
It's gross that the warmest room in our house is our bathroom. That's just how it works. You all know, you got a room in your house that's warmer than other rooms. Let us know in the comments down below what it is. Anyway, I'm gonna put a plate over top, let it sit for at least 6 hours until it's doubled in size. What you doing, Woody?
Preparing to make the hummus.
Ooh, a PB with J cutting board. Where can you get that?
It's pretty rare, but if you're lucky, you could get it. Where can they get it?
In our merch store.
In our merch store. Where is that?
On our website.
On the website. All right, so our family likes really lemony hummus, I've learned. So I'm just gonna put 2 lemons in off the bat.
But the thing about hummus, you could kind of like add roasted red peppers. You could add a lot of garlic, depending on how you like your hummus, right?
Yeah, so we usually just do 1 clove because it seems to continue getting stronger as it sits, and just seems to be the right amount for all 4 members of our family. So we're not gonna mess with that, are we?
So what are you doing now? You're putting the garlic.
I'm putting the garlic into the food processor, and I'm gonna add the lemon and just pulse it for a second, and then I'm gonna leave it for like 10 plus minutes because the lemon juice actually helps to mellow out the garlic, so it's not so astringent. Is that a word? Astringent?
I like it. We're gonna put it on the. We're gonna put the actual meaning of that word right here.
Watch if you get something completely different than I mean. There's 1 lemon going in. Ooh. So this is a nice little lemon juicer. I don't know how old it is. It was my great aunt's. So it's probably at least from the 1960s, if not earlier than that. It's so cute. Maybe you have an old kitchen tool that was your mother's or your grandmother's. I'm saying mothers because, you know, back in the day,
Traditionally speaking, there weren't a lot of.
too many men in the kitchen. But if it was your grandfather's or your father's, very cool. Love to know about your old kitchen tools. That's it. Let it sit for 10 minutes plus, and then you can make the rest of their hummus.
Few moments later.
So we're gonna add 1/2 cup of tahini. And our tahini, look how runny it is, see? Yeah, so good. Just pour it in.
So if it's not runny, what should they do?
That's a great question, I don't know.
Maybe add a little
Cry.
water in it.
Cry. No, you'll just have to, you'll see. You can add more lemon at the end. So the good thing about hummus is you can adjust at the end. You don't have to get it perfect in the beginning. What I usually do is I make it, and then I give Ephraim a pretzel with some hummus on it, and he tells me if it's up to
Is it ready?
standard. Not yet. But we learned last week that it tastes better after it's cooled, remember? Remember I gave it to you and it was kind of warm because it had been blended and the chickpeas were just cooked.
Is it ready now?
No. All right, so you want to scrape it down, make sure everything's getting in there and mixing up.
Is it ready yet?
No, you gotta scrape some stuff.
That's not enough.
Scrape.
She didn't put the chickpeas in yet.
Chickpeas in it yet, Charles. Get out of here. Put it on for another second or 2, like so. And actually, you're gonna keep it running, and you're gonna put in 2 tablespoons of very cold water.
What does this do?
This just helps with the consistency. I'm also going to put in 1/2 teaspoon of salt, which you can always up later if you don't find it salty enough, but usually I find that's enough. Here's what you've all been waiting for. Chickpeas. Your hummus should look nice and smooth, and if you had really runny tahini like mine, it will be really soft and runny. And if it was harder, you can either add more lemon or more ice water if you want.
If you like it really thick, well, it'll also thicken up as it sits.
Yeah,
a little bit.
This is true. It really needs to sit. Like, it's pretty good, but I think letting it sit in the fridge and then testing it will be better.
Is it Ephraim approved?
It's really garlicky this week.
No. But Ephraim approved otherwise?
Really garlicky.
Oh, it's not cold yet. It's on its way to being a good hummus. Just needs to rest.
In our family, we usually make granola bars for several reasons. One is because we're trying to reduce our amount of plastic garbage, and granola bar wrappers are one thing that produce a lot of garbage.
They're usually
especially
individually wrapped.
Especially for kids' lunches.
Like that kid.
She likes granola bars. So, I've been working on something that's a little more crispy. Jeremy has another recipe that's more chewy. But the kids weren't really as into that. Annie liked that one. Ephraim did not. He would not eat that one. I don't know. Anyway, so I've come up with a new one. The good thing about making granola bars at home is you can make quite a few. I make it in the big pan, which I think is 9 by 13. And I just make a really big batch at once. And another thing is that then we know what's going into it. Most granola bars have some kind of oil in them, even healthier ones, or they have like multiple types of sugar. This recipe does have sweetener in it. The sweetener is maple syrup, and I also put a thin layer of melted chocolate chips on top.
So you don't have to? Do you have to do that?
No, like before we put chocolate chips inside, but for this one I thought I'd spread it on top with a little chocolate covered granola bar. Kid friendly, you know. But this would be like a good gateway into healthier eating as well, for someone who's used to really high sugar things, because it still has the sweetness, but it's, I think, slightly better than what you buy in the store. Yeah. I mix everything here in one bowl. No food processor necessary. One bowl, just stir it all together and then press it into the pan. Wet your hands a little so that you can press it down, because it is quite sticky and it's gonna be a little messy. So we use oats, flax. There's also flax in it. Quite a bit of flax. I put half a cup in. You can use nuts. I don't use nuts because in Canada, we have a lot of laws about nuts in public places, especially schools. So I make this completely nut-free, but you could substitute the seeds that I use, which I'm going to sometimes I just use sunflower. Today I'm going to use pumpkin and sunflower seeds and coconut, but you can substitute the seeds for any nut, just chop it up. There's like a pinch of salt in it. There's also tahini is what I use as a binder, but you could use peanut butter. So if you're looking to have a cheaper recipe because you're finding that you need more inexpensive things that you can make at home, then you can use whatever your cheapest nut butter is. So probably peanut butter, but just make sure you're still using the all natural, that it doesn't have any additives in it. That it's just peanuts.
And it needs to be pretty runny?
Yeah, like, because you want to be able to mix it. If it's really hard from the bottom of the container, it's going to be a little trickier to get it mixed in. Make sure you wash your hands, because you're going to be touching the granola bar. No one wants your grimy hands on their food. And the other thing I want to say about these granola bars is that they are crispy, but they are also quite crumbly. So I've been working on that, but when I made it less crumbly, then it was too soft and it didn't get have the crunch. So when you cut them, you'll find that you have a lot of crumbs left. We just throw it into our granola pot, and then we just have a little bit extra granola. And you bake it at 350 degrees for about 25 minutes.
So this broth is coming up to a nice rolling boil. It actually smells really nice in the house right now. I will let this kind of boil for 20 to 30 minutes, and then I'll just turn it off and let it soak like a tea as long as I can, all day. So I like to do this first thing in the morning, just let it sit all day. And then in the afternoon, you'll basically take the vegetables out and squeeze them. And it helps to do that after it's cooled down, obviously. And then just pour this broth into mason jars. Put in the fridge. If you're looking for items like this that I'm using to put the broth away, like jars, this guy, a strainer, they're in our creator cart on our website. Links in the description down below. If you're gonna freeze it, maybe only leave it 3/4 full, because liquid needs room to expand in a jar. And make sure it's room temperature before you put it in the freezer, if you're gonna do that. We have got some broth from last week in the fridge still, but I'm gonna make a soup later on. in this video. We'll show you how do we make a soup from scratch just by thinking. So the broth is all in jars now. It's just gonna cool before we put it in the fridge. Woolie's granola bars are just cooling on the stovetop before we put chocolate on them. So now I'm gonna make some granola, which is something I make at least every 2 weeks, depending on how fast we eat it, really. It's really the kind of thing that you can super customize. You know, any of the nuts or seeds I put in, you could swap out with any other nut or seed. Same goes with the dried fruit and same with the spices. So how it works is we're gonna put all of our dry ingredients and stir it up inside of a bowl. Always oats. Today for spices, I'm just gonna use some cocoa powder. Usually I would use cinnamon. Sometimes I'll do a mix. If it's around like the fall season, I might like a pumpkin spice might be nice. And then for today, for the nuts and seeds, I'm gonna use, usually cashews and almonds are my base. You gotta chop them up. I mean, you don't want them full. They'll blend in nicely. So if you have something nice like this, and if you don't, check out our Creator Cart. We'll have something like this in there that you can get. And then for dried fruit, it's gonna be a combination of raisins, and I'm just soaking some dried goji berries that I got at Costco. Just to kind of soften them up before they go into the oven, because otherwise they'll just dry out even more, so. They're so sweet. I love goji berries. And they're good for you. Here's all the good things about goji berries right there. And then we're gonna mix together, earlier today, I soaked a cup of dates in hot water and they've just been sitting there and they get really soft, but also they create like this date water that I'm gonna use. So I'm gonna put this cup of soaked dates along with like 1/3 to 1/2 a cup of the liquid they've been soaking in, along with 1/2 a cup of tahini. If you don't have tahini, you don't want to use tahini, you could use any nut butter for this. This is what's gonna make it nice and crunchy instead of using oil or like a processed sugar like maple syrup or even just straight up sugar. So spread that out over 2 pans, and then you can either wet your hands and dampen it down. If you got a scrap piece of parchment paper, like I did here, you can just use that to kind of flatten it out as best you can. After 15 minutes, you're just gonna toss it around so that way everything bakes evenly, and put it back in for another 15 minutes. And then kind of break it apart with your hands once it's cool enough to touch. And then you're just gonna store it in some kind of an airtight container. It's gonna be crunchy and delicious. It's gonna stay fresh that way for at least a week, but it'd be good to eat for a long time. But that said, you're gonna eat it up before it goes bad. How did the Aquafaba turn out?
I think it's gonna be fine.
Here's a quick example of our Aquafaba from last week. Aqua, it gets thick like that. And I would use that in place of oil or eggs in baking. I've already used some today. I know some of you have been asking, but let me know down in the comments below how many of you want like an Aquafaba masterclass video. If that's something enough of you want, I'll do something sometime in the future.
This is the decadent part of the granola bar, which you don't have to do. I just do it because I'm a sucker of a mom. And my kids, you know, they always eye the ones in the store with all the chocolate on. So I put a thin layer of chocolate. Looks like a lot of chocolate, but I actually spread it super thin over the whole bar. It's a very, like a rounded 1/2 cup. And it's funny because sometimes I feel like it goes a long way, and some weeks I feel like I'm really stretching it. So I just spread it as thin as I can just to give that little bit of chocolate taste, but not make it like super chocolatey. If you're trying to wean your kids off of sugary things, just every week, just make it a little thinner. They don't know. So I just melted the chocolate chips in the microwave. You could do it in a double boiler, and I do it until they're fully melted. So if there's like a couple chocolate chips not melted and you can just stir them in and they melt, I actually put it on for like 15 seconds after that, just to make sure it's like fully warm, and because the thinner and more runny the chocolate, the easier you can spread it thin. If you want to have a thinner or less chocolate, you could just do like a quick drizzle, and you could do melt fewer chocolate chips. But as I say, I'm a bit of a sucker.
These kind of remind me, if you're familiar with Kashi brand bars, because they're crispy. There's no oil in these things, which is insane to me.
Pop it in the fridge till it's solid, and then you can cut it into bars. And you can make the bars as big or small as you like. But as I mentioned earlier, They are quite crummy when you cut them, so be prepared to have a bowl of granola the next morning for breakfast.
That sounds like a win-win for me.
One eternity later.
So do you see how it's pretty crumbly?
That's not bad though. Oh look, a piece fell.
Oh, I'll get the next piece. It's okay, I'll get the next one. There'll be more. So anyway, you can decide
So good.
here. When life gives you granola, eat it.
Woolie, get out of the chocolate chips. I'm gonna start making these cookies that we make from the leftover pulp from our nut milk machine, our milky plant. We got a link down below for our milky plant. Again, another lovely sponsor in the past and a machine that we use a lot. Hey, Woolie?
Every day practically. Well, not every day. We make enough to last many days.
Yeah, but we use it probably 2 or 3 times a week. What's great is you can keep the pulp that it makes for whatever nut we put in the fridge in a little container or whatever. I use it to make cookies, but you could use it for a lot of things. You can use it pretty much in any baking. These cookies, they're completely gluten-free because they don't have any flour. They have a little bit of coconut flour, but you could use almond flour instead. But it's just bananas, tahini, maple syrup, baking powder, sea salt, coconut flour, flax, the pulp, and then you stir in some chocolate chips at the end. Everything goes into the food processor. You pulse the bananas first, and then everything else goes in, and then you stir the chocolate chips in. I like to use like a cookie scoop, which is roughly like 2 tablespoons worth. So those turned out a lot more liquidy than I remember last time I made them. So I smacked them flat so they would spread out nicely because you can't really spread it with your hands. And then we're gonna bake that for 22 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. You can customize these. If you wanna add, instead of the chocolate chips, if you wanna add some dried fruit, go for it. And if you didn't wanna use tahini, you could use any nut butter. You can make these like a peanut kind of cookie. Although there's a lot of fat in these cookies is one thing I will say. Between the pulp from the nuts and the tahini, you know, it's a bit of a calorie bomb, probably. But it's a nice way to use up the nut milk pulp. Oh my goodness. Too many hours in the kitchen. Now we're gonna make a soup based on what we can find in the fridge. I see spinach, mushrooms, I see Woolie. Woolie, I'm gonna turn you into a soup.
No, bye.
Bye. Willie's leaving. Not forever. She wishes she could get rid of me. No, she doesn't. She'd be sad forever, and I'd be sad without her. Leeks. What else? Celery. Oh, I need the celery for something. Never mind. A zucchini. A floppy zucchini. Floppy vegetables want to be turned into soup. A half a pepper. A very sad pepper. That's gonna go into the soup. Cauliflower is in here. Carrots. Potatoes. And I'm gonna use some lentils from the cupboard. And some spices. Oh, the fridge is telling me to close it. Gotta go, we're making soup. Okay, so this is how I make soup. Just cut a bunch of vegetables. So we already threw in some of the broth from last week. Essentially, I'm just gonna stuff this pot full of vegetables. And here's the thing, I don't have to feel sad about not using these leeks, because guess where these are gonna go? In our broth bag. And then at the end, once it's all cooked, I'm just gonna throw this spinach in, and I'm gonna juice this lime and throw it in at the end as well. And for spices, let's see what we got. I'm gonna throw in some garlic powder, some thyme, some rosemary, and maybe a little chili powder and cumin. Oh, mustard powder? A little sage? Why not? It's going crazy. We're gonna go crazy here. Couldn't find the cumin. I'm gonna leave the cumin out. And then a little salt and pepper as well. Every soup is an adventure. It's never quite the same. Basically, I'm making a double batch here, so I'd say I'm putting in like at least 8 cups of broth, probably, and 6 cups of vegetables, a couple handfuls of green, and I use 2 cups of green lentils. Oh, cookies are ready. Hi, cookies. How you doing? They're starting to brown on the bottom, but they're really soft to touch on the top. You know what? 300 for 10 minutes. Let's see what happens. Those cookies are going to be a bit of an adventure. I'm going to cook that for just long enough for the potatoes and the lentils to cook, which I find is like, I don't know, I'm going to put it on for 10 minutes. But because it's so full, it's going to take time for it to come up to temperature. And then at the end, I'm probably going to blend a little bit of it with my like little hand blender thing. And I'm going to add in the juice of 1 lemon and whatever baby spinach I have left from last week. And the cookies just beeped. I'm just gonna let them sit. They're looking good. They're nice and brown on the edges. They're gonna be really spongy. They're gonna be a really chewy kind of cookie. But it's just a good way to use up that milk pulp so you're not wasting anything. You get like a little, oh yeah, you get a little bonus cookie. Who doesn't like a bonus cookie? Oh, I finally sit down. I've been in the kitchen for a long time. This seems like a lot to do in one day, and it is. You know, we don't necessarily do all these things every single weekend. It depends on what needs to be done and what we have time for. This was a big one, but you could spread this out over multiple weekends. Do a couple of these a weekend when you have time. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. In a good way, in a good way. I know that sounds like a passive-aggressive compliment, but it's nice. The lemon helps a lot at the end. I would season it like just the way I would typically season a soup before I eat it, like maybe a little bit of nutritional yeast, maybe a little hot sauce, maybe salt and pepper if you like. Well, here, just try the broth.
That's pretty good.
Just gonna try one of my cookies. Ooh, they're kind of like a banana bread. And you just had your second cookie. 2 thumbs up, and you approved. So we've been letting those sourdough buns rest all day, and now they've pretty much doubled in size. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cut them into 8 separate portions. For those of you that are watching this video and going, Jeremy, why are you using parchment paper? Why don't you use silicone? Because I'll tell you this, we've had bad luck with silicone sheets in the past for baking. We find that after a while they start to fall apart and it ends up in our baking sometimes. What we do is make the parchment work as long as possible. So this is like the 3rd time I'm using this parchment today. You know, I used it for my granola, I put the cookies right on it, and now I'm flipping it over and using the side that I haven't used yet to put these buns on. And then I'm gonna roll half of them out into like kind of balls, and then the other half into more like a bun, hot dog kind of bun shape. I don't know, I've never done that before, but they're the same size, so they should cook in a similar way. So we're gonna shape these buns, and then I'm gonna put a towel over and we're gonna let them rest for like another hour or 2 to do another proof. And then we'll bake them. After they've rested for 2 hours, I'm going to dip my little brush and just do like, kind of like an egg wash, but instead of using egg, I'm gonna use my Aquafaba and just drizzle it over top and then put some sesame seeds on top for fun. And I bake that at 375 for 15 to 18 minutes and then just let them cool and come to room temperature. Don't cut them open early because they'll just be really gummy inside. Thanks for joining my wife, Woolie, and I as we trudged through our weekend cooking spree. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments down below and let us know what you might like to see in a part 2. Or let us know the kind of things that you do in your weekend cookery prep type things. Hit like if you haven't yet so YouTube knows to send this to other people. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, consider doing so down below. And if you got a little bit of extra time, sit back, relax, because YouTube wants you to watch this video of ours next. They know you, they know your preferences, and they're like, this is the one. This is the follow, this is the dessert to the video you just watched.